to the statement made on the evening of the election victory in 2001 by the leader of the government of the new party, of the ruling party. Having won the elections on a mantra of Labor Now, he stated, and we quote, "Now that the elections are over, the new slogan is Together Now." But as we have come to recognize in the immediate aftermath of taking office and swiveling in the big chair, that the Together Now was not intended for the nation as a whole. It was a rallying call for the troops of the Unity Labour Party, not of the country. So those who thought that Together Now would become a political mantra for the unification of St. Vincent and the Grenadines quickly found out that when the tropical storm passed by, the lumber, galvanized steel, and cement went where they were supposed to go as part of the largesse for your loyalty. They were used to facilitate Together Now. And that is why one of the leaders could have said at the convention, "We must own the jobs too." That's how they can translate Together Now into reality. A rallying call for the party, misinterpreted by some as intended for the nation. Interestingly, Together Now has not been used as a mantra for the government since taking elections. When many thought that as a perceived progressive, Gonzales would have used that mantra to bring a nation together, many analysts are amazed that since taking office, under his watch, the people of this country have pulled apart. Those who thought that Together Now was a rallying call to bring the nation together and heal it at a time when it was not yet so badly fractured, politically and otherwise, got a wake-up call on October 27, 2001, when in his first independence address as Prime Minister of this country, and tracing the historical developments of this country and the pathway to what was perceived as development, hopscotched over the years 1984 to 2001. Hopscotch over that period because it was more important. It was more important to facilitating his own political well-being, his own role. So it was more important to give praise on that development pathway to those he once maligned politically than to admit to the 17 years plus of the New Democratic Party leadership. To those who sought to utilize their critical thinking skills, there was a recognition immediately that we had moved to a stage in our political development. Moved to a stage in our political development that caused us to ponder whither St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Whither St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The importance, dear friends, of that first independence message may well have been missed by many who chose not to see and not to hear. You cannot, in your first such message, choose which sections of history you would want to make, so that a country and its people and its children would have been pondering, so after Cato, we got to you. But that's a 17-year hiatus. And it was a 17-year hiatus where, whether you like it or not, many thought that the country had made significant strides. But political myopia is often a convenient tool. So today, friends, we must understand. The Argyle International Airport was never intended to be a national project. It was to be the mantelpiece of the party. A continuation of the political ethos of the party. And we must own the party. We must own the jobs if we are to own the country. It's one thing to talk about the state of unemployment and underemployment. But what the statistics do not tell us is the political imbalance in those statistics. What proportion of the unemployed and underemployed are ULP supporters? What proportion belong or support the New Democratic Party? That is the acid test, you know. That is the acid test. Access to jobs on the Argyle International Airport appeared more political than based on competencies. The full truth about the project remains unclear even years after construction has been completed. The representatives of the people, those who are or have an understanding of governance, require accountability. But in respect of the Argyle International Airport, the nation's single largest capital project, there seems no need or no desire to provide the people of this country with accountability. As they say, if we build it, they will come. What else you want to know about it? Of what concern is yours how the money was spent and how much money was spent? So the full truth about the Argyle International Airport is yet to be told. Some may recall that we were told initially that the cost of the Argyle International Airport was going to be relatively simple, a few $1 million. hundreds of millions of dollars. And that this was going to be so because we had a quote-unquote coalition of the willing, to wit, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Cuba, and Venezuela. That coalition of the willing was to somehow facilitate a significant reduction in the overall construction cost of the Argyle International Airport. But with no real accountability, no one can determine precisely what proportion of the total funding of the Argyle International Airport was made by the members of this coalition who are not Vincentian. You hear us talk about we helped in other ways, and they helped in other ways. But one of the most difficult things that came out of that project was that everyone knows that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a trucking country. But many of our truckers spend time waiting to see if and when and who will be called to work in trucking at the Argyle International Airport. Many of our experienced construction workers had to stand by and watch Cubans doing work in the construction phase of the airport that they could have done almost with their eyes closed. In some instances, they were the ones doing the more dangerous part of the work. No one is saying that there ought not to be collaboration and cooperation between countries. But we also know that charity begins at home. And many of Vincentians suffered, waiting, only to realize, the truth is, this is also about political largesse. The outcome of the contribution of the coalition of the willing to the Argyle International Airport is as unclear today as it was at its initial announcement. Precisely what were the financial and other inputs by each of the members of the coalition is today still clear. But you see, while Vincentians continued to raise Cain about the AIA not being a national project but rather a party project, found justification in their claims when for the opening of the Argyle International Airport, a star, the symbol of the ruling party, was embedded in concrete for the world to see whose project it really was. And there were those who know that things can't happen without them, daring to suggest that here a massive star is placed in concrete as part of the opening of the Argyle International Airport, but they don't know anything about it, and they order dismantling. Not before the opening, but after the opening, when all of the records of the opening will show the star as part and parcel of the project, a tribute to the party that led it. You could destroy it after that, because history is already written. What really is the difference between us and Zimbabwe under Mugabe? You know, Vincentians were rebuffed when the opposition in parliament, and the opposition is a component of government. Our governance structure suggests that it is made up of the executive, which is the cabinet, the legislature, which is parliament, and the judiciary. So in the legislative arm of our government, the opposition is a full member. And they exercise their rights to call for accountability in respect of the expenditures on the Argyle International Airport. And they were rebuffed. The people they represent were rebuffed. So much for democracy. What is the difference, dear friends? We can play with fanciful terms. We can play how we learn to master the system. We can boast of how we are able to tweak it to our own advantage. But at the end of the day, we ask, is it fair? Is it fair? Is it right? Is it right? And are we engaged in a collective endeavor to transform this nation so that it becomes truly ours, not the possession of a few? Closer interpretation of the government's seeming refusal to facilitate the accountability requested by the opposition in Parliament in respect of the Argyle International Airport seems to suggest that despite the fact that Vincentian taxpayers made significant contributions to meeting the overall costs related to the project, they were not entitled to hold the government to account for how their monies were used on the project and how the overall costs of the project were met. And there are those who will defend the government to the end in that regard. What is that if not a form of dictatorship? Why is it we are afraid to expose the truth? If we were doing something genuinely favorable to the collective national interest, what do we have to hide? Parliament is said to be where the people's business is brought to the fore so that the legislature can discuss and the people garner truth. If the truth cannot be gleaned in parliamentary sessions, then we are fooling ourselves into believing that the institution, the parliament, still has some relevance to governance. Like so many other countries that claim to be democratic, the parliament in St. Vincent and the Grenadines has become something of a laughing stock. And you see them laughing. Douglas Slater, when he was Minister of Health, used to be giggling almost every time. He was more Dr. Giggles than anything else. Because they see the parliament not as what it was intended to be in the construction of a democratic regime, but as an opportunity for showboating. Showboating about the people's business and making a mockery of what should otherwise be the people's business. And that use of parliament as showboating, unfortunately, has on occasions affected both the government and opposition sides in the House. Because sometimes in their eagerness to be seen and heard and to facilitate their own political egos, even some members of the opposition find themselves disposed more to showboating than addressing in principle the real issues of what has happened to our country. Today, dear friends, the Argyle International Airport is operational. But apart from telling us that more people are coming into the country, that more flights are coming into the country, that we are building hotels because more people are coming into the country, we are not being told about the important issue of the current cost-benefit analysis of the Argyle International Airport in its early years of operation. We have to take their word for it that they're doing well. We have to take their word for it. Trust us, man. They're doing well because we say so. But it's the same regime that asks us to trust them. When they get up one morning and suddenly suggest that Nine Mornings was celebrating its 100th anniversary with absolutely no historical evidence to support the claim. It is the same regime that asks us to accept that they wake up one morning and was able to tell us during the Nine Morning celebration that Nine Morning has brought significant increases in arrival to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Again, without any statistical evidence to support that claim. Talk is cheap, and politicians love to talk. Today, as it is operational, the Minister of Tourism, like the Minister of Finance, and the veritable corporation soul that is the Prime Minister, all sing from the same song sheet because they own the party, they own the jobs, and they own the country. They stand and claim one after the other that the Argyle International Airport is a success story. Unfortunately, so far, the success has been that it has been constructed. Therefore, there is greater access so that more planes can come and hopefully more people can come. That's the success story. But unfortunately, they gave us nothing in which we can sink our teeth in pursuit of truth. To add to the insult of lack of accountability relative to the construction costs, we have had no idea thus far of the operational costs since the project has been completed. We understand only too well. When you build an international airport, yes, you may think from time to time, if we build it, they will come. But it takes a while for them to come in numbers that render it economically viable. And that is fine if you have a projection that is realistic as to when you expect it to become economically viable. But we don't have that. And as far as the ruling regime is concerned, we don't need that. All you need to know is that it is functioning. It does not matter that people who have lived in the areas for years understand all too clearly the impact of the salt air on infrastructure. Remember, Argyle was a pleasure spot. So people are very well aware of the damage that had been done to the pillars for the bridges that were constructed at Argyle. They have watched the destruction of houses, homes, businesses that were in the area, and the heavy maintenance costs. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. All you have to do is continue to drive by the Argyle International Airport and go from the seaside, drive around, and recognize the veritable construction equipment graveyard. That came to be. So even as doing that to and has done it to neighboring buildings, what is the maintenance cost of the infrastructure at the Argyle International Airport? What is the maintenance cost? And are we able to keep up the maintenance practices that the project requires? Or will we wait until it is too late? What is the impact that the salt air is having on the planes that stay out there exposed to the elements on a daily basis? What is the net impact of the salt air on the buildings themselves, on the jet bridges? Because all you have to do is stand up in the terminal and watch the rusted goo come down the pillars on the jet bridges, because it is a daily occurrence. But it has been built, and if we build it, they will come. But the responsibility of a governmental administration goes just beyond building things. Because if we build things and they are not maintained, maintenance is not sustained, then we will have incurred a major loss, and successive generations will hold us to account. Dear friends, unlike the view adopted by the political minions, these questions have merit, because they are directly related to the way in which our governmental system has been operating. In the modus operandi of the government of the day, truth appears to be the most difficult thing to access. Truth. Most difficult thing to access from the ruling regime. Questions of immense importance to the Vincentian populace are all too often trivialized by the government and its minions. In Parliament, it is virtually anathema for any member of the government side to see and acknowledge publicly any merit in anything that any member of the opposition dares to say on any issue. That is the best they could get in respect of Together Now. There is a sense in which, dear friends, the government leaves it to a sort of corporation soul to be the lone determinant of the merit and or demerit of any issue, on any issue in all of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Prime Minister means first. And nobody, it appears, is his equal. What then, we ask, is the difference between Mugabe Zimbabwe and St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Is it a question of degrees of difference? How wide is that difference? Like Mugabe, the political leadership in St. Vincent and the Grenadines has apparently abrogated unto himself a sort of self-styled infallibility on all matters. It appears all too often that he believes that he alone determines the morals and ethics of just about everything done and said, such that some may well be at the point where they believe that his every word is law or should be law. After Mugabe's death, the government of that country, Zimbabwe, the government that had ousted him, insisted on giving him a hero's burial. And there's a tiff, which they say has now been resolved, between what the family wanted and what the government wanted. But Zimbabweans will always remember their political history. They will remember from whence they came. They will acknowledge the good that Mugabe did by leading them to the path of liberation from under the brutish Ian Smith regime. They will long remember his land to the landless that gave many of them an opportunity to live, an opportunity to hope, an opportunity to understand the value of life, meaningful life, rather than mere survival. But in the midst of everything, Zimbabweans will remember the transformation of Robert Mugabe himself, the transformation of his politics, the shift from liberator to veritable rogue, placing self-interest, self-image, bigotry, his embrace of hubris over and above all that he once fought for, inevitably tarnishing his own place in history. Sounds familiar? This latter analysis, dear friends, should serve as a stunning reminder and a stunning word of caution to our current Prime Minister in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It should serve him notice that while as a political leader of this country, he may wish to write his own history, the nation's historians and those of the Caribbean will inevitably write what really happened during his tenure. It is not about you writing what you think you wanted to do or what you think you have done. The truth will eventually be told. Children of this country, as yet unborn, will read our nation's history and judge for themselves rather dispassionately the unbridled truth as distinct from what the politicians sought to present as their truth. No amount of personally written books will ever change this reality. Enough said. But you know, friends, we have not forgotten, nor will we ever forget, the reality is that on the 14th day of September 2019, today, 4,645 days since the disappearance of SVG Air J8VAX. Disappeared on Sunday, the 19th of November 2006. Dominic Gonzalez, the pilot, Rashid Ibrahim, eager to come home to his family, asked for a ride because his flight was late. They never made it to sentencing. In our airspace, just off of Beckway, they were in last contact with the tower at Annersvale and in contact with the pilots on the Liat plane that they gave first preference to come into land. Nothing had been heard of them since. The Cockamamie report that was presented to the people of this country, spurred by the fact that Rashid Ibrahim's mother, Nisha Branca, raised Cain on several issues, being the first one to tell the Coast Guard that a plane missing, being the first to tell the company that owned the plane that a plane missing, and was initially scoffed at, eventually called them out. And we get a Cockamamie report that was quickly published. But that institution that published that report should very well be ashamed of itself. And those who were responsible for the report should also be ashamed of themselves. But who do they want to accept it? And why? But you know, as fate would have it, just inside of 4 years after that, on Thursday, the 5th of August 2010, 9 years ago, another aircraft from the same company, SVG Air, J8SXY, disappeared without a trace, going in the opposite direction. J8VAX was coming from Kano and descendants. J8SXY, he called out the man to conduct a mercy mission, to go to pick up somebody who needed medical attention. He never reached. But we are yet to see any similar report, even a Cockamamie one, on the disappearance of J8SXY. What happened? There's some strokes for some folks and not for others. Why did the nation not receive as fulsome a report, however Cockamamie it was, from the authorities on the disappearance of J8SXY? Was Suresh Lakram's life not as important as the others? But that is the country we live in, and that is the practice. When you own the country, when you run a country in the way in which it is being run, and where political largesse and political patronage hold sway. And in a similar vein, dear friends, a similar vein, we remind you as always that on the 19th of September 2008, we're coming up, we're coming up next week on the 11th anniversary 11th anniversary of the death of Patricia Bowman as she went to work. On a rainy morning, and somebody's wall collapsed on her car, and she was crushed to death. As we come up on the 11th anniversary, we ask for justice. Do we have an understanding of what is the role of the Ministry of Legal Affairs in these matters? Where is justice in a system which we boast of as being fair and democratic and equitable? Where is the justice for Alban Bowman? It's not cash that he's looking for. He's merely asking for justice. But apparently, he has to pay to get that justice. And despite the outcome of whatever inquiry or inquest or whatever they had, that identified organizations and the individuals as being culpable, nothing has happened. And because nothing has happened, there is no justice. And the law on you doesn't yet find it an appealing enough topic to address. We can talk about just about anything else on the law on you, but not that case with Patricia Bowman and her husband Alban Bowman. But we seek to convince our people that somehow we are engaging in fair play and that we have an interest in their well-being. We pray God for justice. And you know, dear friends, elections are in the air. This and other matters we'll deal with in our next edition of Just Another Look. Enough said. You've been listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Callaloo presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Nice Radio, first aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m., with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info, or you can check out our Just Another Look blog, www.justanotherlook.com. I am, of course, Keith Joseph.